Now, Mystery Quest will travel to Russia in an attempt to gain unprecedented access to the remaining physical evidence. If successful, they will attempt to conduct the world's first DNA tests on that evidence. The results could rewrite history. Hitler was defiant to the end, but told aides he feared being captured.
The Soviets were preparing to close in on the very center of Berlin. It would be impossible to hold out much longer.
On April 29th, Hitler married his longtime companion, Eva Braun. The next day, the Fuhrer met with his few remaining friends and staff outside his study to say goodbye. Then Hitler and Eva closed themselves into the room. Misch remained at his post. He says someone yelled they'd heard a shot, but no one moved.
A lot of time passed until somebody said, "Now open the door."
He says he saw both Hitler and Eva dead. Minutes later, he saw the Fuhrer's body wrapped in a blanket being carried down a hall outside to the Chancellery Garden.
They passed me, and I could still see the shoes. They weren't covered.
The Fuhrer had ordered his aides to burn his and Eva's bodies. He had secretly feared that the Russians would display his dead body. Dr. Nick Bellantoni has just an hour to examine the Hitler evidence in the Russian archive. He begins by examining a stack of documents known as the Operation Myth files. Operation Myth was launched by Russian dictator Joseph Stalin in December 1945 to investigate the circumstances surrounding Hitler's death. He named it Myth because he suspected Hitler's death was a myth and that he had in fact escaped. But the clock is ticking, and Bellantoni is forced to move on. He moves to a fragment of the sofa where Hitler reportedly died. Bellantoni begins by using cotton swabs to moisten old, dried blood so that he can lift a viable DNA sample to test. He takes samples from 5 different parts of the sofa, putting each into a separate envelope so there's no cross-contamination. Next, he examines the skull. The bullet wound is clear.
It looks like an exit wound. This would be the back of the cranial fall, right about in here.
The skull does show evidence of exposure to fire. Using a special chart to look at bone color and cracking, Bellantoni determines that the skull was not burned for long.
There is some burning going on here, not a cremation, but a burning nonetheless.
With time running out to record the evidence, Bellantoni takes photographs and makes sketches. He also gathers a physical sample for testing.
Because of the way this has been stored in, bone is flaking off.
The fragments will allow Mystery Quest to perform the world's first DNA analysis of the skull.
What we'll do at this point now is to take all of the photographic evidence we have, the samples we have taken, along with the information of the crania that we have, and we'll bring these all back to the United States. and do some laboratory analysis to see what we can extract here that might help us with this mystery.
Dr. Nick Bellantoni is back in the U.S. to test the blood, skull, and soil samples collected from Europe. The science team begins by looking for traces of Hitler's bones from his reported burial site in Germany.
I have a couple of samples from Germany for you. It might be what we're looking for.
But the soil does not reveal any traces of human remains that can be compared against the skull fragments to confirm they are Hitler's. Bellantoni next performs a forensic examination of the high-resolution images he took of the skull. He's noticed something.
Well, upon our return from Russia, one of the things we wanted to do was take a look at our photographs that we have, blow them up, and really see if we can really get some good detail on top of the forensic information we achieved there. A few things that are pretty striking here and actually problematic. One thing we had noticed in Russia and really are highlighted here in these photographs are the sutures are very open. And what the sutures are, if I can use this model, are basically where the various skull plates come together and you get this little jigsaw line where the bones come together. Really what happens basically as you get older, they start obliterating. We know Hitler died at 56 years of age and really quite open for someone of that age bracket. These look very young, like a more someone that's 20 to 40 years old.
And there's something even more shocking about this piece of skull.
The other thing that we noted also in Russia and see here very much in these photographs is the thinness of the vault plate. It's rather small, and as a result, it's something we would not expect from an adult male. Usually males are more robust. If the police brought us this, we would have thought it was a woman, to be honest with you.
This could mean that the skull the Russians have held for decades isn't Hitler's at all. To their surprise, the team succeeds in identifying viable DNA in both the skull and sofa samples.
Oh, wow.
But we got something.
Looks like we actually got something.
The bone fragment, I'm really surprised at that. And the swab, goodness.
They will now isolate and replicate the DNA through a process called molecular copying. This will give the scientists more material to look at. The analysis will potentially call into question all conventional beliefs about Hitler's death.
Looking at the bones, I thought there was a possibility, but I never really imagined that it really would come out this way. Wow.
Now, the analysis of the science team will be vital in determining whether the rest of the Russian account is true. Dr. Nick Bellantoni doesn't think the skull the Russians say is Hitler's is really his. He says the areas where the skull plates come together indicate the skull belongs to someone much younger than Hitler would have been at the time of his death, and may even belong to a female. The team was able to extract something called allosomal DNA from the skull and blood evidence. This reveals a person's gender.
In females, there are 2 sex chromosomes of the X variety. A male has 1 X and 1 Y as his sex chromosomes. The red boxes tell us what the computer says is there.
First, the team looks at the DNA results from blood on the sofa.
The blood sample contains predominantly male DNA.
So the blood on the sofa came from a man, But whether it actually belongs to Hitler can't be proven without a DNA sample from a relative. While Hitler has living relatives in the U.S., they did not respond to inquiries from Mystery Quest. The team turns to the DNA result from the skull.
So the sample, which came from the skull, has only a female signature in it. And so we think that's come from a woman.
So you're saying the bone fragment came
The
from
bone fragment.
a woman, a
that's
female.
The skull of a female.
Wow. And you're absolutely positive about this?
As sure as we can be.
Wow.
Mystery Quest has uncovered groundbreaking new evidence that calls into question the historical account of the death of Adolf Hitler. The expedition team, using 3D animation, proved that the eyewitness accounts historians used are unreliable and probably wrong. The science team gained access to the skull Russia has long claimed as definitive proof Hitler did die in his bunker, and discovered it is in fact a woman's.
This is very exciting.
Very exciting.
These astonishing facts may open a whole new chapter in history, leaving us with an even larger mystery.
We're going to change everybody's perception of not only these remains, but what maybe happened to Adolf Hitler and others in that bunker. If this is not Hitler, who is it? And as a result of that, we've got a lot more homework to do.